it will take years, maybe even more than a decade, until we will know the full true cost to the global economy of all of these grifts: the green grift, the digitalization grift, the electric vehicles grift, the education grift, the NGO grift. All of these have cost a lot of money and have achieved approximately nothing. And they didn't cost just American taxpayers or just European taxpayers. The taxpayers of almost all countries of the world, with very few exceptions, have been defrauded to fund these transnational grifts, which at best turned out to be entirely useless, but oftentimes they produced a net harm to society and not just an economical one. The misallocation of capital is probably the biggest evil committed by these. And we can see, if we look just a little bit back, like 2 years ago, in some of the countries of Asia. Let's explore. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the propaganda basement here on the Freedom Alternative. Alrighty, so we continue through our little pile of newspapers from Laos, and we're gonna address some things that were controversial a few years ago. Maybe they still are by the time I'm publishing this. I have no idea, but nevertheless, these things need to be known because at some point, maybe in a few years, we're gonna need an inventory of all of this crap. So effectively, I'm doing my part. Alrighty, Vientiane Times, August the 29th, 2023. In the meantime, as you've seen in the previous episodes, the political crisis in Thailand had been over. So, here's some public health grift. We're not going to talk about that, but in the meantime, we're going to talk about this one. So, the government and the United Nations Development Program launched mobile app for public e-services. The National Digital Transformation Agenda aims to digitalize government services for the Lao people through 3 pillars, namely a digital economy, digital society, and digital government. As part of the process, the Ministry of Technology and Communications, with support from the UNDP, on Monday launched the GovX app. This is a new mobile app that aims to improve the delivery and accessibility of government services to citizens, businesses, and government officials in Laos. The app was developed as part of the national strategy to transform digital governance and is a significant step towards establishing a new standard and model for digital governance. Several months later, as I was in Laos, of course, none of this worked. Standard, it's all a grift. And it's part of the Technology and Communications Digital Government Strategy, which aims to make government services more accessible, efficient, and transparent. None of this happened. The new app is now available for free on Google App, whatever. Minister of Technology, Dr. Bovingsham Vongdara, said the app is a major step forward in our efforts to improve the delivery, whatever. I would like to thank the UNDP for allowing us for supporting us in making this service application possible. The ministry is working with the UNDP and other partners to develop a number of other digital government initiatives, including National e-Government Portal and the cloud-based data center. All of these were a grift. And it's not just in Laos. This one, the cloud-based data center, whatever, this grift happened in Romania as well. Of course, it doesn't work because all of this was a grift. But it is particularly striking in Laos because, just the other page, so just open the paper, right? So it's page 1, page 3 is this grift, and page 2, restoration of power lines underway in flood hit, whatever, right? Then you have this grift, highlight the importance of sustainable innovation. By the way, this particular district stayed without electricity for several weeks. And in fact, especially whenever there is a quote-unquote natural disaster, that is to say some landslides or things like that, which happen all the time in Laos because that's the landscape there. I mean, it's a feature of the natural landscape of Laos. There's not much you can do about it other than move entire localities, which sometimes is possible, sometimes is not possible, not even in a communist country. They remain without electricity. So you have portions of the country that don't have electricity, at least not in a continuous matter, right? Even though Laos is a net exporter of electricity, right? But instead of spending money on addressing that, you spend a crap ton of money making an app that effectively nobody uses. And by the way, it also doesn't work. But again, even if it were to work, the whole thing was a grift. And the UNDP, I haven't checked, but you can check it for yourselves, who are the main donors to UNDP. I bet you it's 5 or 6 countries of Europe and the United States. That's usually how it goes. And by the way, the contractors chosen for this are routinely Chinese. So congratulations to the civilized West for yet another subsidy to the CCP-controlled companies, because they already don't have enough of those. So you have areas of the country that don't have electricity, and you make another app with the CCP. That sounds like a great idea. There you go, the digital driving license. Nobody uses any of this. I was there when a few months later, after allegedly this came into force, and I started asking around, even state officials, and every single time I was like, the digital what? They hadn't even heard of it, let alone actively use it. It's just not a priority at all, not an actual need at all. And spare me, transparency in the Laosian government. Are you kidding me? No, that won't happen, because that's not possible. At least not as long as the current communist regime is in place. And of course, everyone knows this, but they just pretend they don't, because why not? All right, let's move further, because there's some. Where it is? There you go. BRICS expansion to give the global south a louder voice, says a South African expert. And I don't need to read further to know that this is Chinese propaganda, but there you go, Johannesburg via Xinhua. So I already know that it's Chinese. How do we know this? This kind of headline, says an expert, is how you figure out that you're reading Chinese propaganda. Now go ahead, go back to reading most of the press communique by Public Health Incorporated in your favorite country, and see most of them start with something really bad, some of your freedoms need to be taken away, claims expert, says expert. All of those are CCP propaganda, all of them. Yes. All right, so what is critical to BRICS expansion is for global South countries to have a global role to play in balancing international relations and building consensuses, a Johannesburg-based expert has said. Global South countries will benefit from getting united and speak with one voice on key issues of their interest, says David Moniai, director of the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, to Xinhua in a recent interview. BRICS leaders agreed on Thursday to invite 6 countries, namely Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, to join the group during the 3-day annual summit held here this week. Yeah, how did that work out? Argentina ended up not being too Western. Ethiopia forgot to attend the meetings. United Arab Emirates, of course, continues to do its own thing and doesn't particularly care one way or the other. Let me see who else was on the list. Okay, Saudi Arabia, same thing. I mean, they went into a very pro-Western / pro-Israeli type, and Iran was already anti-Western anyway, so not much of an achievement. But again, notice this thing with the experts. But of course, what is not said here, and one of the reasons is because, of course, this comes from a news wire from China, so it's just introduced here as a world affairs type of news. But what it doesn't say here is that people in Laos, and that includes a lot of the members of the regime, a lot of the nomenclatura, they don't see themselves as global South. They just don't. And sure, the party ideologues maybe they do, or at the very least they see that they see themselves as China's backyard, and wherever China goes, we'll try to go as well, I suppose. But even within the party strata, right, within the nomenclatura, a lot of them are not particularly keen with this, and definitely not the global the local populace, the national populace, because, well, good stuff comes from Korea, from Japan, from the US, from Thailand, from Europe, not really from the global south. So there's that, which is particularly funny, especially when you consider that Russia in particular is a big fan of trying to lure relatively prosperous capitalist countries into their little global south club, which of course doesn't particularly work, but that's a separate story for another day. What is to be mentioned here is that this whole thing, when you see claims the expert, you should suspect Chinese propaganda, because almost always that is the case. Very few exceptions, really. Global inflation pressures could become harder to manage in coming years, research suggests. This one, although sounds Chinese, it's from Associated Press, which is also kind of Chinese. Rising trade barriers, aging populations, a broad transition from carbon-spewing fossil fuels to renewable energy. The prevalence of such trends across the world could intensify global inflation pressures. Okay, a bit over 2 years after this was published, we already know that's not exactly the case. In fact, the whole transition, well, what do they call it? Transition from carbon-spewing fossil fuels to renewable energy. Yeah, all of that is dead. Thank goodness. Zemlei betonom. It should have been dead a decade ago, but I suppose better later than ever. And then here's something that is effectively counter-propaganda, but nevertheless it's true. I mean, it's framed a little bit propagandistic, but it's taken straight up from Japan. So, rise in Japan's unmanned rail stations creating concerns. Amid a declining population, an increasing number of stations in Japan's local train lines are switching to unmanned operations as railway companies target the bottom line amid decreasing passenger numbers. The trend is evident even among the nation's biggest operators, with nearly 60% of the 4,368 stations operated by the 6 Japan Railways Group passenger companies now running without staff. However, unmanned stations bring with them their own set of concerns, not least compromises in convenience and safety. One local government official in his 40s recalled being left bewildered by the lack of information at Ozai Station in the southwestern Japan city of Oita earlier this month after Typhoon Kanun had rolled through Japan's southwestern Kyushu region, forcing cancellations and disruptions of train services. There were few remote announcements to inform passengers of the situation, which went unmanned on July the 1st. The inconvenience extended beyond emergencies or platform usage. One third-year high schooler said she finds it annoying that she's unable to renew her commuter pass through an attendant now that the ticket counter has closed. The decision to remove staff from the station came despite it serving as a stop for express trains in the morning and evening rush hour and its proximity to a new residential development. In fiscal year 2021, Ozai Station saw an average of 1,789 passengers a day, making it one of the busiest stations across the Kyushu Railways Corporation's entire network. Even so, the company says its usage patterns justifies its switch to unmanned status. On those routes alone, 338 stations, so 59%, are now unmanned. The pace has surged since 2015, when the firm decided to become a listed company and set its sights on improving revenues. So it turns out that not being a public company tends to help both the consumer and the shareholders. I'm just saying. Not having international institutions as your shareholders tends to help. I'm just saying. Other regional companies have even higher rates, with the state-supported Hokkaido Railway Corporations and the Shikoku Railway Corporation respectively running 71% and 81% of their stations without staff. Conversely, East Japan Railway, which manages stations in many concentrated urban areas, has the lowest rate at 47%. Unmanned stations have also become a subject of legal disputes. Since 2020, wheelchair users and other parties have filed numerous lawsuits with the district court claiming their constitutionally protected right to freedom of movement is being infringed. Some plaintiffs said that they're no longer able to board trains without making a reservation and that having to do so is a burden. For others, the lack of staff may have proven fatal. In December, a woman with a visual disability was struck and killed by a train on the tracks at the Tsukumi station in Oita Prefecture. While the station is not completely unmanned, the accident occurred at a time when no staff were on site. The case led to questions about the safety of unsupervised stations. In a bid to improve service in stations without staff, Q should turn to introducing camera and intercom systems, and although the firm can also dispatch employees to help if needed, they need to be contacted in advance. Elsewhere in the country, some operators are working to avoid empty stations. Okay, whatever. GR East plans to expand the same systems to more stations. Okay, one thing. You would expect, given the Japanese propaganda this time around, most Westoids really, they do believe that Japan is a technologically advanced country and whatnot. When in reality, imagine your most tech illiterate boomer and then realize that that's 70% of Japan. People watch footage from downtown Tokyo, especially the corporate district of Tokyo, which, yeah, it's relatively futuristic, not particularly nice, but futuristic for sure, and where the percentage of digitally literate people per square kilometer is probably not 100%, but definitely much higher than 90%. But then there's the rest of the country, which is really not like that at all. So this will be interesting to follow over the years because no matter how you look at it, this whole digitalization thing, in addition to being a grift, is also a security threat. It really is a security threat from all sorts of angles, from cybersecurity to physical security. Like, there you go, some people may actually, not just may actually, some did already end up in fatal situations as a result of excessive push to digitalization. Now, of course, there is also a flip side to that. If you want to avoid that, then you'll have to be willing to pay more. So there's that. But nevertheless, neither in Japan nor in other places in the world, you're not allowed to discuss that. Well, now they are allowed in Japan because, well, people have filed lawsuits, and suddenly when you hit the regime where it's forced to act, suddenly this becomes permissible. But I'd like to see some of that in Europe as well. Some of these very fast digitalization efforts are very poorly thought out, and some of them straight up dangerous. And yeah, the whole, and it's all driven by techno-optimist propaganda and all sorts of irrational fears. Like, in Japan is the irrational fear, oh, but the population has decreased. Okay, fine, then why do you have the most crowded stations who definitely do have customers, continue to have customers? You have those unmanned. Meanwhile, remote places have manned train stations. So, it's definitely not the decrease of population that's driving this. It's something else. And okay, I'll refrain from making the comment that I just wanted to make. Anyway, you can see China Daily here upset that will we ever see real climate action? Okay, I'll give you the answer. No. By CCP standards, which is of course global communism, no, we will not see real climate action by that definition. All right, let's move to the next newspaper. Also Vintin Times, obviously. August the 31st, 2023. And here we have two important articles on the front page. So, the Prime Minister orders urgent action to address economic woes. The Lao Prime Minister has directed authorities to take action to urgently address the country's economic financial difficulties amid continuing depreciation of the Lao Kip, rampant inflation, and high public debt. The Premier signed an 8-page order on Tuesday that instructed concerned sectors to stabilize exchange rates, rein in the price rise, and to do more to settle the debt owed to foreign countries. The Prime Minister urged state agencies and society to join forces in the battle to address economic challenges. One of the biggest challenges is stabilizing the value of the Lao keep and ensuring adequate supply of foreign currencies needed to import goods. Under the new order, the Bank of the Lao PDR has been directed to deal with any unlawful activities aimed at manipulating exchange rates. This is fun to read because, of course, none of this worked. The central bank was tasked to monitor and identify target groups that carry out money-changing activities using their personal accounts and run currency trading. The government warned that it will penalize anyone who conducts money changing, as this role is granted only to commercial banks. Of course, the radical idea of anyone can do exchanges is not on their radar. The government ordered state agencies to implement measures that will bring in more foreign exchange to Laos and restrict imported goods. The government announced it will cut public spending on non-essential projects and restrict the imports of luxury goods and products that Laos can produce. In addition, the government will continue promoting the use of electric vehicles to reduce imports of fuel. Yeah, that worked out well. Not. One of main items requiring a large amount of foreign currency to import. As of May this year, almost 4,000 electrically powered vehicles had been imported into Laos, saving hundreds of thousands of liters of fuel that would have to be imported. The government's next goal is to have 550,000 electric vehicles in use, accounting for at least 30% of all vehicles, and for 100 charging stations to be installed by 2030. Okay, it just so happens that I have a lot of footage with how traffic is being conducted in Laos, and as you can see, there isn't much of a middle. It's either big, beautiful American trucks, which consume a lot, or relatively basic lower middle class Japanese cars. Electric vehicles, at least during my stay in Laos, and not just in Vintin, also in the provinces, I've seen exactly zero, quite frankly. I've seen some electric scooters, yes, but electric cars, just no. Like, not even one in more than 2 weeks. And it's not that I haven't seen cars. As you can see, I have a lot of footage from that. But it's just not a thing. And again, I was there a few months after this was published, so at least in theory, I should have seen some effects if those measures had been indeed effective, but of course they weren't. The Ministry of Finance wants to prioritize Lao products when buying office appliances for state agencies. Official trips abroad by state officials to attend meetings, seminars, and workshops must be selective, with only important topics for the nation being allowed. Authorities are banned from buying expensive imported beverages, but they are permitted to buy locally made drinks to see for welcoming domestic and foreign guests. Authorities are also not permitted to spend state funds for buying imported gifts for domestic and foreign guests. The central bank was delegated to make a list of business units that will play the role of assisting the government in market price intervention so that they can benefit from the credit subsidy policy supported by the government. Of course, none of this worked. But I guess the restriction on foreign beverages kind of worked. Nevertheless, you should see it's also quite funny. That's usually the first thing that a communist government tries to limit, which is the luxury spending of the nomenclatura. Why? Because that is usually one of the highest expenses of the state. It's a feature, or maybe I should say a fixture. That's not a feature because it's a bug, but it's a fixture of every single communist country. I mean, the same is true in North Korea, right? In North Korea, the biggest imports are luxury items and luxury beverages, luxury everything, of course, for the nomenclatura. The same is true, of course, in Laos. Most of the populace can't even afford that anyway. And even if they can afford it, I mean, even the foreigners who may want that, they also bring hard currency into the country, so it's not really that much of an issue. But state officials, of course, they don't. All right, teacher shortage causing poor learning outcomes. So it's kind of a continuation of the article that we mentioned in the previous episode. Same here. There you go. The plan includes providing greater support for teacher training colleges across the country. Colleges are advised to admit only students who are qualified. Whatever, more trainee teachers will be encouraged to study subjects that many schools are in need of through the provision of scholarships for dedicated students. The ministry will encourage colleges to produce well-trained and effective teachers. So basically, the last episode we read about the shortage of teachers, and we've seen what the provinces are saying, which is we don't have a shortage of people, we just bad policies not allowing us to employ them. And the central government comes in, oh no, we're just going to give more money to colleges, and we're going to bury you into even more bureaucracy, and that will solve the problem. Now, did that work? Of course it didn't. But that's the thing, whatever the government touches turns into manure. It's just the way it is. And none of this will change. Nevertheless, it's really fascinating to read how a communist government in 2023, in this case, thinks of things. There you go. Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia share plans for modernization of auditing. Meanwhile, these two have done some great progress in the meantime. Laos is still where we left it off 2 years ago. So it is what it is. There you go. This is another one. This really does have a 1980s vibe. Like, in the 1980s, in the Romanian press, we would read on all sorts of very fruitful partnerships with Cuba, right? With revolutionary Cuba. Same thing now. Lao Cuban Media Agencies Inc. Pact on news sharing. Lao Press in foreign languages under the Ministry of Information, and the Prensa Latina News Agency of the Republic of Cuba signed a cooperation agreement on the exchange of press services. The Prensa Latina News Agency will be the first media partner of Lao Press in foreign languages, aka Vintin Times, in Latin America, enabling the Vintin Times to report on events taking place in Cuba and the whole continent. The Wednesday agreement is an opportunity for the Vintin Times to extend its foreign outreach with media partners in more continents. The move gives the Vintin Times more options when selecting news items from other countries and regions, using those media outlets to get reports from a local perspective. The Vintin Times currently has links with more than 50 media organizations in more than 30 countries who share news through the publication of text and photographs and access to each other's websites. The Vintin Times partners with 10 news agencies, including the Xinhua News Agency in China, Kyodo in Japan, the Vietnam News Agency, TASS Russian News Agency, and the Turkey News Agency. I think they're partners with Anadolu, if I recall correctly. The Vintin Times is also a member of the Asia News Network. Anyway, you would think that either getting some North American or dare I say even some Central American or European partnership would be a priority, but no, Cuba. Once again, this is not a decision made on editorial grounds, on practicality grounds. It's a decision made ideologically. They're big friends with Cuba. But still, we should look at how this worked out, right? And now Cuba doesn't have electricity. So I'm not so sure that partnership turned out to be a good idea. In any event, in the meantime, as this was being published, the civil war in Myanmar was breaking out, and it's still taking place at the moment of this filming. Who knows, maybe by the time this hits YouTube, this will be over and you will know the outcome, and I don't when I'm recording this. But anyway, Myanmar will cooperate with other countries, including Bangladesh, to implement repatriation process in Rakhine state. The government of Myanmar will cooperate with other countries to accept those who left their homes in Rakhine state, announced the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Myanmar has observed that certain countries and international organizations issued statements and made remarks on the incident that took place in Rakhine state in August 2017. It was learned that the statements were made by some countries and some international organizations regarding the incident that occurred in 2017. In fact, the incident was caused by the coordinated and synchronized attacks of the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army terrorist groups on 30 police outposts and a regiment headquarters. But certain countries and organizations have purposefully neglected their brutal acts. At the time, the security forces, including Tatmadaw, were forced to attack the ARSA, and in accord with the rule of engagement. I mean, this Asian English is fascinating. To maintain peace and stability in the area, as well as to protect the local populace, according to the statement. Thus, the ministry highlights that the incident that took place on August the 25th was purely terrorist acts committed by ARSA, and the terrorism in all its forms and manifestations should be condemned. The term Rohingya has not been found in any historical and legal documents of Myanmar, it said. Well, you just used it right now, right? Where is it? You use it here. So we haven't found the term. You 2 paragraphs prior. Thus, deliberately using such terms and issuing statements and remarks to politicize the incident would not give any constructive support to Myanmar's sincere efforts at early commencement of repatriation of verified displaced persons based on bilateral arrangements between Myanmar and Bangladesh. In accordance with the principle of leaving no one behind, the government of Myanmar delivered humanitarian assistance. Okay, one thing you don't see mentioned here is that the government of Myanmar is, at the moment of this writing, August 31st, 2023, the government of Myanmar was at that time, and still is when I'm taping this, an illegitimate military junta, which ended up in power through relatively violent, although by Myanmar standard, a peaceful coup d'etat, right? So, it's not the legitimate government of Myanmar, but at the behest of the CCP, the Vintin Times is, of course, a big fan of the junta. So as a result, from this newspaper's perspective, it is the legitimate government of Myanmar. So yeah, you don't see this noticed at all. There you go. Some confirmation of what I was mentioning in the previous episodes. International Labour Organization report reveals challenges experienced by Lao migrant workers. And, although the ILO is a little bit more ambiguous about certain things, it still paints a very decent picture. You will notice that this is very common in Asian newspapers. They just assume that the reader will know what the ILO is, just like, where was this one? Okay, PM for Prime Minister, okay, fine. But, this, again, MOFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so actually the more internationally recognized acronym is MFA, but nevertheless, this kind of thing with using acronyms and just assume that the reader knows, it's a very Asian thing. It's rarely explained. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes it isn't. Maybe I should also mention that the whole Rohingya incident is still uninvestigated, and no matter what you say about it, it's going to be controversial. But I also, I forgot to mention, and maybe I should say it now, this tone of certain countries, there you go, certain countries and organizations did whatever, certain countries and international organizations did. So it's not an explicit condemnation, it's always this vagueness. Communists always love these vague kind of statements. Now, to be fair, I kind of get it, because you can't really argue against everyone all the time. I mean, you can, but at some point it just doesn't work. I think we have time for another one. So, Vintin Times again, September the 6th, 2023. Government needs to intervene to explore cost-effective imports to cut prices, says an economist. Again, says the expert. The government needs to undertake further intervention and explore more cost-effective importing markets to lower the cost of essential consumer goods amid skyrocketing living costs, a senior economist has suggested. Although the Ministry of Industry and Commerce has undertaken a number of measures to regulate prices, especially of food, by selling rice and meat at subsidized prices, costs remain high. Vice President of the Laos Academy of Social and Economic Science, Dr. Kikeo, I can't pronounce that, said intervention is still insufficiency. He suggested that action be accelerated and a study be carried out to learn about the price structure of essential goods and commodities affecting the lives of low and middle income earners. The findings of the study will enable the authorities to undertake reasonable management and intervention measures, said the economist at the top of the state think tank. However, he added current price controls cannot guarantee price cuts given the high production costs resulting from the need to import materials. In these circumstances, we should consider reviving the state food enterprise, which previously operated. With regard to essential items such as petrol and medicines, and the economist said the government needs to explore new, cheaper importing markets. He also recommended providing incentives in addition to tax breaks to encourage the use of electric vehicles. I mean, this whole thing is funny. I mean, the reason I wanted to emphasize this article is mostly to show that these grifts, effectively, do not have an effect just on wealthy countries, such as the countries of Europe or the United States. When some of these brain worms and mind viruses that infect intellectuals, right, these terrible ideas that only an intellectual would believe, eventually seep into, well, the global south, more realistically, in some of these developing countries, and they end up harming very poor people as well. I mean, what did the small-time merchant in Luang Prabang did wrong? What did he do wrong in order to be taxed so high to pay for these kinds of grifts? And I don't mean necessarily just this newspaper, although maybe this newspaper as well. But subsidies for electric cars. I mean, who can afford electric cars in Laos? Well, it's mostly the nomenclatura and the people who work for mostly foreigners, really, who are consultants to various large-scale investments. But then again, those people don't need the subsidies. When these ideas come to our societies, eventually they don't just harm us, they also harm people significantly poorer than Europeans and Americans. That's why I'm hoping that as time goes on in this decade, more and more non-leftists are learning and start being more consistent in applying this kind of mentality, which is, no, these ideas are cancer. No, I don't care about, oh, but it reduces carbon emissions. I don't care. They're bad. The very idea is bad, and its implementation 100% of the time, everywhere, is straight up evil, because it basically robs poor people to benefit the limousine class, the laptop class, the upper middle class, essentially, the more left-wing pricks in the upper middle class, because that's really how this works. Alrighty, that will be enough for now. I'll get back to the Lao-Cuba relationships in the next episode. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe. Please do consider becoming a member if you like these kinds of videos, because they can't be possible without your financial support. And I'll see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative. Cheers!